Welcome back, everybody, to the Booked Solid podcast. This is Steph, and I'm here with my co host, Hannah Caitlin Parker. And today we are ecstatic to have a very special treat for you guys. We are thrilled to welcome our very first editor guest to Book Solid, Jamie Lapeyrolerie. Jamie is an editor for both Multnomah and Waterbrook, two imprints of Penguin Random House, and she has generously offered to join us here today to discuss all things editing and publishing. We're going to talk about her own career. We're going to give you guys a peek behind the all magical curtain. We'll get some advice for authors at various stages and just everything in between. Welcome, Jamie.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. Such a nice intro.
Oh my goodness. Well, we have had so much fun throughout this podcast whenever we can. Peeling back that curtain, I think books and the industry forever is going to have that magical element because it's what we all love about it. And you don't always want to see every single step of how the sausage is made, but especially given how much is always mysterious, it's been really helpful to us and our listeners to just really understand what's going on and how to navigate it. And this is a really important piece of the puzzle that people have so many questions about. So it's extra special. I think this is around our 30th episode and you are our first editor. So it's special for us. So thanks again.
Of course. It's not as scary. Oh, my cat has joined us. It's not as scary as I think people think, but I'm happy to kind of dispel some of the myths and encourage in any way I can. So
wonderful.
Yes. I feel like so many times with publishing, everybody's like, okay, once you sign the book deal, you kind of go silent and you're like, I can't tell you anything about anything I'm doing. I can't say a word. So I feel like a lot of authors out there or aspiring authors are like, what really happens?
Yeah.
What's really going on back there and behind the scenes? So
mystery,
we're excited.
keep it all
Yes.
Not at all. Not at all.
Totally.
So we would love to start, just kind of figure out how you got your start in publishing and where this career for you kind of began, what led you to being an editor for these imprints with Penguin Random House.
Yeah. I love talking about this because I think it's so fun with publishing, and whether you join it or you know someone, there are so many different paths to working in publishing, whether it's authors who published first and then decided to be, editors or vice versa, or, whether it's I graduated, I got an internship and then boom, and then there's my story, which was not like that at all, but I'm very thankful. So got to go back a while in college. And so I graduated in 2003 and I did journalism. And so I wrote a lot, and love sport. Well, I still do love sports, but love sports. And so I was a sports editor for, our college paper, and so long term, and I love photography. And so I was like, oh, I'll do sports photography, this and that. And, going to, like I mentioned, private school, you graduate and you're like, congratulations, here's your loans. You have to pay back now. So you're like, yeah, I need a job. And there, a lot of it was like, well, just do some freelance, take some pictures, submit them, maybe we'll pay you. And I'm like, that's fun and games, but again, you're like, well, I need a job, and so I just kind of got a job and then got into wedding photography and did that for a while. And fast forward a few years, me and one of my best friends moved to Austin, Texas. We're just like, let's do it. We feel God's calling us there. No rhyme or reason except we like adventure and got into that. So I ended up being there for 8 years, but while there, I did decide, wedding photography long-term wasn't for me, just every weekend and all the work that comes, with it. And it just wasn't what I want to do long-term. And so I had kind of blogged then as well. Like I said, I do still write nonfiction, but, and so I wanted to keep writing, and I was like, maybe I'll do a book blog. And this is around 2012 now. They were newer then, so it was still kind of fresh, so to speak. And so I would do pictures of the books because, the photography and this and that. And that grew. And so I got to know, it was, for whatever reason, it was easier for me to connect. And I didn't really know a ton about Christian publishing. If I'm being honest, I didn't realize it was such a thing. It's just like, these are faith books. You're not,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
lot of people like not looking at the what imprint is this. Some do, and
Mhm.
that's fine and that's great. But back then, I was just like, oh, this is a book. A friend recommended it. That whole thing. And before social media blew up with Book Talk and Bookstagram, you just I like this author, so I'll get every book this author, and they happen to sell it
Mhm.
at this store that's a Christian store, whatever. And so got to know a lot more about that. And so their programs are just easier to, I think, connect with. Like Bethany House had a super easy one, and to find, I should say, and all that stuff. And so built that blog up, and then when I graduated college, like editor was always like a cool thing, but it was like, oh, you have to move to New York. I'm not
Mm.
at that
Mhm.
point. I was like, I'm not leaving California,
Yeah.
to live and die in LA, and so it was just like, oh well, that's cool, but whatever. And it wasn't as easy again. I think you guys know this, like to just find jobs online, like that was still kind of new.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It wasn't every publisher had career link here, Indeed or whatever all the sites are now. But I was fine with that because I was like, oh, well, I want to do this and this path and that. And so around then I just started applying, and it was a while before I landed this job, but I would just apply because I was just doing a job. Love the people I work with, but just doing a job to pay bills kind of thing. And then doing
Mhm.
blogging and this on the side, kind of how that all is. And yeah, so I would apply. And I was just talking to a colleague at PRH where it was like, I know I'm not qualified, but I'm just going to apply just to kind of like go through the motions, of like,
Mhm.
okay, updating my cover letter, doing this with the resume. And it would be like in spurts, like, almost quarterly ish doing that. And so finally, I was on the PRH website and just scanning, and I was like, oh, Waterbrook marketing. And I was doing marketing in my other job. At that time, I was like, oh, I'm actually qualified. I'm actually qualified for that.
Yeah.
Then looking at the uh, what they were asking for, and then because I had my book blog, like I had like what I like to tell people is even if it's adjacent. So if you're a big bookstagrammer, if you're a big TikToker like that, especially if you're looking for a job in marketing or something like that shows like, oh, hey, I'm connected. I know how to talk about books, and so the book blog did actually really play a role in helping me at least get that that interview and get connected. And yeah, and this was 2016, and so pre-COVID, so it was still requiring me to move, which was great too. And so yeah, it happened like I applied, had the interview, they flew me out, and then boom, I was moving to Colorado, which is wild because I hate the snow. So like living in it. Stephanie, I think born and raised in
Oh
Southern
my gosh. Whew.
like it's
Totally.
72. It is a cold.
Uh-huh.
You guys, we got to get sweaters, you know.
100%.
So yeah, so that opened the door into getting into publishing, and it was great being able to do marketing for it, getting to just learn the behind the scenes of like, oh, okay, this is how we talk about proposals. This is how, okay, and every publisher, of course, does things differently, but it really was, yeah, it was fun, and PRH has a lot of cool perks like free books and this and that, and so, yeah, and then opportunity came. Some of our editors switched imprints or left, and so an editorial position came through, and yeah, so I got to move into that role, and that's, I guess, coming up on 3 years if I'm doing my math right. So yeah, so that's gone by fast
It's
too,
amazing.
but yeah, so I get to edit fiction, nonfiction, and what we call gift product, and so that's journals, even like card games and different things. It's, I guess, a way to, it's like, oh, you interact with the product more. So there's usually
Yeah.
journaling space, or like our coloring books. Our coloring books are very popular. So we get to do a different. Sometimes we do them in house, which is fun because we get to write, and then sometimes we acquire authors for certain products. So yeah, so it's been great. It's been so much fun being able
Wow.
to acquire a bunch of different topics, and but yeah, I love personally reading fiction. I read nonfiction too, but also I'm getting to work with authors too. So yeah,
That's
yeah, and then I do
amazing.
my own writing on the side still, which we can add links later. But yeah, so
Yeah.
it's fun to be able to balance both of those and work on my craft personally, but then that also helps me work with authors as well. So yeah.
I love that. I love that you really kind of started as a book blogger. I feel like we have a lot of Bookstagram followers, or Hannah and I as authors have always shared book reviews. It's like we love books and we want to do something with it in our life. And I love that you ended up in an editorial role. And I saw the box of books you posted from Penguin Random House. I'm like, am I in the wrong job? Because I want that box of books.
Yeah, whenever we get that
So
email,
fun.
we get to, I think it's twice a year now, they'll send out the list and we're like, which books am I going to get? You know, we're all sending a link. Hey, the link went live. It's time to get the book.
Totally.
So even though I have like 800 unread books, you
Right.
know,
I mean, always.
Too many, never.
Yeah, I know. So I know Penguin Random House and all of the big five have many, many, many imprints. So obviously they're all kind of all over the map. So you guys were in Colorado, but then they have ones in New York. Is that kind of?
Yeah, so majority are in New York. Kind of we call the building the mothership. I went to New York a few years ago with one of my colleagues and friends, and we got to visit. You know, and it's cool because the lobby has all first editions of, you know, they've been around forever, so they have first editions, and so it's great. So a majority are in New York, but yeah, there's Waterbrook and Multnomah, which became part of Penguin Random House, I want to say in the early 2000s-ish. And so they stayed in Colorado. And then I know there's some in San Francisco. I think even there's an audio in LA. So yeah, there's a few, but majority are definitely in New York. So it's fun to, when I'm ever over in New York, to get to say hi to people I work with there too.
Totally. So one of our other questions for you about your role and how it all fits together is kind of what your team structure looks like. And we know that term acquisitions editor, but then there's obviously you started in like a more junior role. What does your team look like, and what within that framework specifically do you do?
Yeah, so definitely even imprints, but definitely houses, you know, like HarperCollins or Baker or something like that. Everyone has a different way, and the imprints within work differently. But at Waterbrook and Multnomah, all the editors and even our associate editors are from beginning to end with the authors. So we acquire, we edit, and then we what we like to say is we champion them once, you know, it leaves our desk, you know, goes into production and then marketing, publicity, but we're still like on the calls and answering questions with sales and say, hey, you know, pitching, or what we do is launch, you know. So for us, you know, I'll get proposals from agents, or we also, you know, if we're at a conference, like especially in nonfiction world, connecting with people, and then we do our research to be like, okay, why is this a good fit for Waterbrook? You know, how can I quote unquote sell this to our team? And so, you know, it goes through editorial, and then we have a pub board, which invites marketing and publicity to speak into it. And then from there, you know, we like to meet with the author and agent, and yeah, go from there of acquiring it. And then once it's acquired, you know, depending, and this is probably something you guys have known to do, of like, it's written or it'll be available 6 months after signed contract or whatever it is. That's more, again, nonfiction, because oftentimes with fiction, we want the full manuscript or majority, you know, before we acquire. And so, yeah, so that's how we do things at Waterbrook, you know, kind of from beginning to end. So hopefully you like me if you sign with me.
Yeah, I love that.
But yeah, so that is, and you know, publishers that do it differently, there's no right way to do it. I want to encourage all listeners too, if they say, oh no, I acquire and then we assign, that's not a bad thing. That's just how they do things. But yeah, I really do like that we get to be from beginning to end with our authors. So
Yeah, I love that. And it occurred to me this morning, which I have known for several months, that you were the editor for Kendra's beautiful book,
yes.
Between You and Us. And that was fun to hear her author behind the scenes take on it all. And she just spoke the world of you. And I just love that book. So it was just fun to hear how you...
I had listened to that podcast. I was like, okay, no, just kidding. You know, it was great. I love working with Kendra, and I just got her next manuscript. So I'm
Oh,
excited to
exciting.
get to dive into that.
Yes.
But that was such a fun experience, and she was so open to actually let's change.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
but yeah, that's a great part of the process too. So
Yeah. And just as a reader of Christian fiction and mainstream fiction, reading it all, I felt like she was and is such a fresh voice. I feel like it
Mhm.
was just very literary, but also kind of whimsical, little rom-com in there. I
yeah,
loved that. So I'm
yeah,
excited for more from her.
me
Yes.
too.
Well,
Me too. I'm glad you guys
since
like
her book just landed on your desk, that kind of bridges into our next question of how once you have a project in your hands and it's greenlit, you're ready to go, how much will that book typically change? Because I'm about to turn in my first novel. Stephanie is about to be on submission, and we pour so much into these books, and then we're looking at them, we're like, this is going to be ripped to shreds. Like, oh. So how much do you typically see a book change? Does it just depend? Kind of what does that process look like? I know it's probably different author to author, but we would love to know what the average process looks like for you.
Yeah, it really does depend. And and I feel like most of my answers I'll try and stick with the fiction response, because I know a lot of the people who listen are fiction writers and love fiction. But it definitely a lot of times we have, like I said, the full manuscript or at least the full synopsis when we acquire fiction. Sometimes if it's a more than one book deal, we have a general idea, and then we just kind of, me and the author will say, hey, next book ideas, let's brainstorm, let's see what works best next for you, and all that. But with that first one, we have an idea of what the story's going to be. Like we know what's going to happen, what's this. So if it changes, like if they're like, I actually decided to kill off the main love interest, and this is a story about grief, we're going to be like, actually no, because we acquired
Yeah.
a happily ever after.
Hold on a minute.
So
Yes.
save that for another. Of course that doesn't happen, but extreme example. But yeah, so we have an idea of what's to come. So I think the big stuff is, again, if there's a big plot point, or so it's not scary. I know it can, especially because you're about to go into this. It seems like they're gonna but
Yeah.
what we do as editors is we're gonna make this the best book it can be. So like we acquired it. We acquired you as a voice. We believe in this book. So anything we do is not to make it work. Well,
Yeah.
is to make it succeed more. And so, whether it's like, hey, you have this kind of side relationship that can go deeper. Like let's dig into that more. You have this scene where it feels like, no, they would get deeper. Like that's a big thing. It's like, go deeper. Make the characters more vulnerable.
Raise the stakes.
Yeah,
Right.
just like what would be a real reaction to that, or is it like that seems a little dramatic for this character at this point in the story, and with that, it's like, okay, so why did this happen? What's the reason you want of the plot to move this forward? Okay, it's that, so maybe it can be this, so it feels more connected to the character. So a lot of times if it just feels like out of the blue for the character, or but that's all stuff that isn't, might seem huge, but honestly isn't like, oh no, I got to change the whole story.
Totally.
So yeah, it's all to just make it connect more with the readers, and just feel more honest, not just a dramatic tension for dramatic tension's sake, or it's
Yeah.
like, oh man, I love this mother-daughter relationship. It's honest in some of the issues, so how can we develop that more? Or there's some books where it's like, okay, and I think just because this is being, me and friends joke, a geriatric millennial, where we're older and our parents are getting older, and even if they're healthy now, it's that balance of like, okay, parents are getting older, we want to make sure they they stay healthy and for as long as they can. So it's like, okay, how do you navigate that relationship where they're still their own people, but you care about them and you love them. And so like when there's a book that kind of deals with that, I'm like, oh, a lot of your readers are going to be starting to enter that phase of life, even if it's 10, 15, 20 years of it, but it's still like my parents aren't as young as they once were,
Totally.
like rude, but it's reality. So it's like, oh, let's dig into this because this is going to be something your readers really connect with.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of it is just, dig deeper, or hey, let's expand on this, or that doesn't feel like the character, so let's get to the bottom of why you want them to do that. So it's all part of the editing process. And what I encourage people, especially when I'm working with debut authors, when I send it back, I'm like, it's going to look chaos. There's going to be a lot of comments.
Yes.
A lot of tracking with this, but that's okay. Like, this is normal. This is not, you do not win an award for the most, edits ever.
Yeah.
It's this is what it is, so be encouraged by that, because,
Yes.
that they have stakes in it too. So I hope that
Totally.
That stakes word.
Yeah, in my newest book, I signed with Danielle Egan Miller, my new agent. She's a love. She's amazing. And we just did a I want to say revision, I guess, but preparing for submission, kind of another pass. And I have a chapter. It's a mother-daughter relationship. And when you said go deeper, my husband was like, how did you feel about this revision? Like, this is your first time, like, not being self-published, doing it with like someone she's very editorial to, which I love about her. And I said that I was like, I feel like my book was deep, but she literally made me like dig deep. And the mother-daughter, it was harder. I felt like I was giving myself therapy because I was digging into my own, oh my gosh, I'm almost 40. My parents are getting older. And it was that, exercise in digging deeper into myself, which every author does.
Hard.
But I love that challenge, because those books we read that make us cry and feel, it's because the author felt it too.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you just need that push. You're like, okay, this is, because I've even done, because I sometimes do like magazine articles or whatever, not a ton, but sometimes I'll do, and I'll get back edits, and it's like, oh yeah, okay, you just need someone to be like,
totally
on this, you just drop this point and like leave, and you're like, oh yeah, okay, blah blah, so totally. But that's great. Yeah, Danielle's wonderful. I've got to work with her on different things, but
she's
that's
been
part of it. And then also want to point out, like, what all the stuff I'm talking about is considered, the developmental edits. And then after like the rounds of that, one, maybe two of those, it's like, okay, then me and the author will do line edits. So that's more just like making sure the sentence structure flows and trying to catch some of those things. And then once that happens, it goes to production. And so I am so thankful for copy editors. Like, I love copy editors. It's funny. I'll hear, people are like, oh, if they find out I'm an editor, they'll be like, oh, you're going to check my grammar. Like, which I'm not. But also, like, actually not my strong point. Spelling, I'm terrible at spelling. And grammar, like, I mean, I know basics, but like finding every little, like, not my skill set, which is totally fine, and the copy editors, though, I'm like, you guys are eagle eyes, like, thank you, and great way to, and even like checking, like, hey, you said this happened August 4th, 1982. Was a Wednesday, not a Thursday, and they do a lot of that. Our copy editors are great with doing that. And so there's that process too. And then, it goes through proofreaders, and the author obviously reviews it a few more times then. But it's funny. That's why I always tell people, and I'm sure you guys have seen this meme, when, a finished published book and you're reading it and you find a tiny mistake, whether it's a comma or this, at that point you're like, hats off, you made it through 10 readers, like, you deserve to be in print, grammar mistake or whatever. And it's like,
oh my gosh.
So I always just like shake my head knowing, like, the author was probably like, how? The editor was like, how? And so I was like, it's fine, I get it.
Right?
But,
oh my goodness. It's so true. With my first self-published book, I had gotten it to a point I was pretty much ready to go with it when we blinked. And I have this amazing friend, Erin Clark, who listens to the podcast. I love you so much, Erin. And she's so smart and she has such impeccable taste. I was like, hey, will you like read this to just like, it's so close to being final. She reads it and she used to be a lawyer. She's just got that eye. She literally sends me a spreadsheet, you guys, in Excel. And it was like at least 12 different things that I 100% had wrong in terms of what you were saying. She was like, this song was playing in 2007 in your book, but it didn't come out until 2009. I don't believe that they would be wearing this outfit in 2012. You need to change the trend. And I was like, thank you so much. I almost really embarrassed myself. So
that's great. That's so helpful.
It's like they're almost fact checkers too.
Yeah.
And
for sure.
It's naturally to them. They just notice. And it's crazy that you can write it. You can read it 100 times and not know, but we love you copy editors.
We're definitely looking for that too, but you're so focused on big picture this that sometimes you're like, oh yeah, thank you for catching that,
100%.
Yeah, definitely try. So yeah, you through and you're like, okay, we gotta do a correct for the next printing or whatever. But yeah,
totally. Oh my goodness. Well, that gives us a lot of great insight into the process and makes it feel a little less scary. I love too that reminder that once an agent and then the editor finally signs you, you're all on the same team. You're trying to make the best book possible. You believe in it. You want it to reach as many readers as possible. And then you want those readers to love and gush over it. So I think that makes me feel better. You too, Hannah?
Yes. We're in the thick of it.
I love that. Well, we would love to talk a little bit about what you are personally looking for right now, hoping what might land on your desk. I threw it out to Instagram. What would you want to ask an editor? And a lot of them said, what would excite you? What are you looking for? What are you going to see in that proposal and pages that's going to make you want to sign that author?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question, and of course one that I get asked a lot, and even agents will say like, "Hey, what are you looking for?" So I'm saying the right thing, and again, I want to encourage that it's going to be different for every editor, even within the same imprint and same company. And again, I'm focusing on fiction. That's because like there's trends, yes, but like if you're like, I want to do sci-fi, and the trend is romance, like do sci-fi, it'll eventually find a place. But if you're like, oh, I got to go in this trend and it's totally out of your comfort zone in this, and even your platform, if your Instagram is growing because you love talking about romance and you're like sci-fi, people are gonna be like, wait, what?
Yeah,
it makes no sense. So I encourage you, whatever it is, to stay with it. Trends are great, but also you want to stick with your skill set and what you're passionate about. And so for me, like, genres, of course, there's so many different ones that I like looking at. And one thing I want to say too is why it depends on the editor and the imprint is, like Waterbrook fiction is more, we don't publish as many, which you could see with what we release every year as say like, any of our other publishers, which is totally fine. Our program model is slightly different than others. And so, there's a ton that I'm like, oh, this is such a great book, but I know we're more selective because of, I just acquired 2 in that genre or whatever. So, I also want to encourage, you guys that a no doesn't mean it's bad. Like, and I know you're like, okay, whatever. Like there are so many factors as to why someone might say no. And, might not. And it's not because the story isn't good or the writing is good. There's so many things we speak to. So what I would encourage you to say is if you're like, oh, I love rom-com, and that's great, and I want to write a rom-com, what is something that can help it stick out? Or say World War II fiction, I think will forever be a popular genre. People just love knowing the stories and being and reminding of, good does win kind of thing. So what are some something slightly different you could bring to a World War II novel? Is it location?
Mhm.
Is it based on a real woman? Like I'm seeing, which is great because personally I read a ton of historical fiction, and so it's like, okay, if this is World War II, I read one, about a female spy that never knew about in history, which, it's always like, why weren't we taught about the women who
Right?
changed the tide of the
Right.
war? And
Yeah.
okay, that's a different angle of, it's, I'll mention her later, but it's Codename Helene by Ariel. I'm going to say her last name wrong. I think it's Lahan. But
Oh, yeah.
fantastic book. But she was like the number one spy on the Nazi hit list. You're like, she literally was an amazing spy who contributed so much. So that's, that's World War II, but also different than,
New
and there's
twist.
nothing wrong with, a nurse and soldier fall in love. Like, those are great. But what's the story of that? Is it's, like I said, location. Think of one part of that could stick out. So, World War II, there's a lot in the European theater. So is there a story in the Pacific theater that you can focus on? Or if it's at home, there's another book I read for one of my book clubs that was about female pilots that didn't fly over Europe, but contributed a lot of all kinds of things, and they even had crashes and women lost their lives because of it. And so it's like, oh, wow, that's an amazing story of women who served in World War II, So again, if it's rom-com, what could be something that is unique? Maybe it's the backstory, or if it's following a trope, because people love tropes. It's we love they're tropes for a reason. People are like, I want the lover, I want the besties to love her, or whatever it is, or in historical, the marriage of convenience, like whatever it is. Think of something that can just be like, oh, okay, that's a hook I can use for sales. That's a hook I could use when I'm pitching this to, my team, if it's a mystery or whatever it is. Just think of like, what can I do that's slightly different, that still fits a very popular trend, but will also be like, oh, that's such a fun hook, that they can use. So yeah, I think that kind of answered the question. I kind of went on.
Yeah. No, that's great.
Yeah.
You mentioned it briefly, and since we have asked every single type of guest about it, I'm going to ask you your thoughts on platform. And as an editor, when you get that, how much is that playing into your decision? Is it really just all about the book? Are you looking for a certain number of followers? What are Jamie's thoughts on this?
Yeah. Again, nonfiction is a totally different world when
Totally.
it comes to platforms. So if you're thinking like, oh, I do want to write a devotional eventually, or whatever it is, platform plays, I should say, a different role in that. That comes alongside to say, hey, I'm seeing as someone who speaks to this, people trust my voice in this, so boom, I can
Right.
There's not like a, here's the number, there's no magic number. But if we're seeing, oh, hey, they have this, slightly smaller platform, but man, the engagement is amazing. So that's nonfiction world. But with fiction, I think it just looks different. So again, many of the authors I've acquired do not have huge platforms there, and they've worked on it, and I see growth, which is great, because I'm like, look too,
Yeah.
So that's encouraging. But a lot of it is the concept with fiction, seeing that, and you could even see some of the big authors, like, yeah, of course there's the huge ones who have hundreds of thousands of followers because their books are made into movies and this and that, and they're seen kind of as a who talks about the writing process. So there are those two, but yeah, it's the writing is always the key thing, because they'll be, I'll look, hear an idea, I'm like, oh, that sounds so fun, and then kind of read the sample writing, and it's like, ugh.
Yeah.
It's not just what I was hoping it would be. Maybe in a few years as you work on your craft, come back and talk to me, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so yeah, it's, you don't need 50,000 followers, you don't need that. What we want to see is that you're committed to growing and marketing and learning some of those tools. And what I love about, especially in the Christian fiction world, is everyone is so interconnected, and it's so fun to see. And like at conferences like ACFW, or the Art of Writing, which is ECPA's one-day one, where it's just like, oh, hey, you know, and everyone's just like, oh, you know,
Yeah.
so excited to see each other, which is great. And so it's like, oh, how can you use that to support each other? And there's creative ways to do it. And of course, if it comes with a big platform, we love that too. But we want to see, like, no matter what your platform is there engagement. So what you're posting, do your followers resonate with that? So if you're, say, posting, oh, here's a short story and like 0 likes, you know, versus like, oh, you got 100,000 likes of your cat, which I get.
Yeah.
But it's like, okay, so maybe there's a miss. Let's see what we can do to work on that, or just connect, like say, hey, this is, get the followers that want the short stories, you know, get that, or whatever it is, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
all that to say, there's not a magic number with fiction, just because fiction is different, and people, we sell it so much on the story and the concept. And then we want to, people will remember the cover, what it looks like, and the title, but sometimes not. You know, they'll be like, oh, what was the author name? You know, so we hope to get to the point where, yes, they recognize the author name, and you know, they become the automatic buyers of that author. But so
I love that.
That's good to hear.
Be encouraged. It's been not huge numbers.
Yeah, it's been so torn on the podcast. We ask almost everybody this, just what their thoughts are. And I think I would say it was 50-50, but some people are like, you have to have the platform. You have to have the platform. And then some are like, who cares? Don't worry about it. Just do your thing. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's really encouraging.
Yeah, I think platform. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. I was just going to say the social media is so up and down, and the algorithm changes its mind every day. And so I feel like right now it's just hard for a lot of people to see that growth unless they just unexpectedly go viral or something like that. And bookstagrammers aren't going viral all that often.
Yeah.
So it's just hard.
And platform isn't always like the number of Instagram followers you have. You know, platform can be, you speak at a lot of conferences or book cons or whatever it is that you are out there where the readers are. You know, so you make connections that way and in different things. So it is, and I get why there's different answers, because next week there could be a new one that blows up, you know, and this, and like, TikTok is huge right now with the bookstagrammers, but it's kind of like, okay, has that had its, not heyday, but it's like, is that still selling books as it once is?
It changes so quickly. Yeah,
totally.
You see it with TikTok, at least with fiction, when you get those viral posts, you know, that for whatever reason just exploded, because some of the posts that go, you're like, that account didn't actually have a ton of followers. It just got picked up, you know. And so,
I know.
So there's going to be different opinions, and I'm sure even at the conference, but it's just like, okay, take it, hear what they're saying and why, and then maybe kind of move forward with that. But I don't think you have to be like, okay, it's TikTok. I hate doing videos on myself, but I got to get on TikTok. You know, that's also not, it's going to come across as inauthentic and awkward.
Totally.
So what it is you want to do, like have some kind of presence, you know, website and maybe at least one social media. But yeah, if it's, hey, buy my book.
Totally.
You know,
I know.
You can tell the people who love it, and it's great. They're, you know, they're having fun and this and that, and that's great. But so
I feel super encouraged by that. And I feel like when we started this podcast in January, February, it was something I was wondering, and just we've talked about it so much. But I feel like my bookish people, like you said it, Christy Cameron, our agent guest, said it, like it's really about the writing at the end of the day. And I really, it was like 2 to 3 weeks of just real deep work on getting this revision done for myself. I realized that I'm not going to say it's for everyone, but maybe in general, like the novelist brain isn't necessarily the TikTok brain. And like TikTokers are so talented. I mean, I could not do those edits so fast that I'm like, what? I need quiet. I need reflection. I need prayer. And like the two do not mix when I'm in that deep space. And so maybe there's seasons where I do love social social media and I have a lot of fun with it, but I can't do both at the same time. And I'm like, that's okay. Like,
Yeah.
go do what I can, but there's really no substitute for working on your craft and digging into yourself and getting the story right. And I think it's going to show, like you said, if you're just at the end of the day, a good book has to stand on its own. So,
and if I would say, because the marketing background never kind of leaves, it's always there, always hanging out. But
yes,
if
I understand.
You're like, oh, I kind of want to dip my toes into TikTok. One thing is, the thing about TikTok is there's always some kind of trends you can jump on. I have a TikTok, but 100% it's my cat. Like, they'll be like, oh, funny voiceover, and then I just go my cat and do it. So there are, you could go on Book Talk, look up that hashtag, and then you're like, oh, okay, here are some fun things I could do of me showing my book, me doing, or whatever it is that can help you kind of, okay, maybe this isn't so scary, or you're like, I hate it, and that's fine too,
Totally.
But it doesn't have to be like, I have to create this editing video and this and
totally.
that. So if you're thinking about it, there are ways to do it with testing it out that aren't as scary.
Right. And also the simple question of like, where are your potential readers hanging out? Like, I am almost 40. Hannah is, I'm 38. So, and Hannah is 10 years younger than me. And like, her people might be on TikTok more. Honestly, it's not as much necessarily for certain targets, right? So where are they hanging out? So, well, thank you. That's, I really love hearing your perspective on that. So thank you.
I will say this, the audience I tried my hand at TikTok because I love social media. I have a marketing brain too. So I just love all the things social media, but TikTok is a whole different group of folks than the Instagram people. And I'm just going to say TikTok people have no chill. So I would try for a little bit. And then I was like, okay, you guys are not for me. I'm going to go back to the Instagram and hang out with my friends. So it's just on the matter.
I feel like with TikTok, it's like, oh, you connect with strangers and you comment on strangers. Whereas Instagram, it's like people, are like relatively.
You form some genuine connection. Yeah.
But it's funny with TikTok. I saw one where she was like, if you know me in real life, my TikTok is not for you.
Get off.
Kind of funny. But I was like, oh,
I have to say too, that is the most awkward thing. And I've like faced it more as, because I've been like working on edits for my book at gymnastics. We're waiting on my daughter. And so all these people are coming up like, what are you doing? And I'm like, author. But I can say that is true. Like, people will say, oh, I saw you posted that. I'm like, you saw what? You know me in real life? No, ma'am. You need to get off.
Totally.
That is a funny little. It's weird the world we're in.
Another like final note on this is that I have this like deep desire. I have 3 daughters. My oldest is 11. I really want to write like a teen book one day in the next 5 years, or series or whatever. But I recently got on a TikTok rabbit hole, and there are literal teenagers. That is where they hang out. Literally, these 17-year-olds have millions of followers. So I'm like, okay, later I'm kicking that can down. But at some point, if I want to reach the teens, it's a different beast. So it's just interesting to think about where people are hearing about their books. I'm in Hawaii right now, and I literally am that crazy lady. I go as far as before. I don't take pictures of strangers with their books, but I'm like, what are they reading? And I always want to know how they found out about books. And it's interesting. And I would say that the layperson in Hawaii, it's not what I thought it would be. I thought there would be a lot of the buzzy bestsellers. It's a lot of like backlist. It's a lot of like older books. I saw a woman reading The Help.
Backlist king. Like,
yes.
Of course, new books we love them. And yes. But I mean, there's books I'm like, I'll personally read. I'm like, well, this came out 15 years ago, but I've wanted to read it, So
totally.
But yeah. That's
well. Lots of fun.
Yes. So we would love to know what words of advice you would give an author like Stephanie that is about to go on submission, and maybe what you would tell an author like me who just finished her first book and is sending it off to the editor very soon. We would just love to know, because we both are very nervous for very different reasons right now. I've already walked through what Stephanie's walked through, and it was too much anxiety for me. So I'm glad that's over. But we would love to hear from your end, kind of what advice you would give those us in our two
Yeah.
very different spots.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. And I think one of the things is on the faith end of it, it's like, just trust that God gave you this call, that he's leading you. And I know sometimes we're like, okay, whatever. Like, yeah, I know that, but that's not what I'm doing.
Live,
But
laugh, love.
as people, of faith, I think there is that obviously that added piece to the publishing journey, and that's a beautiful thing. So yeah, so be excited that God has, not be excited, I know you guys already are, but like be encouraged is the right word, that God is with you every step of the way. So yeah, so that's my first encouragement. But also, I've said some of this is especially for the for you, Stephanie, and for those who are with the agent and getting ready to submit or in the process, that a no is not a rejection to you personally. Like I will say, and I've talked to many other editors, writing rejection emails, having to say like, "Hey, we can't move forward." Like I hate those. It takes me forever to write them, even if it's 2 sentences long, because I'm like, like, sorry,
Yeah.
because of course, whether your program is 5 books a year, 10 books a year, or 50 books of, novels a year, you can't acquire every single book you get a proposal for. It's literally impossible. And so yeah, for reasons I already talked about, just be encouraged to keep going. And there are times when I'm like, oh man, this I love her writing or his writing. I really want to work with this author, but this idea is, for whatever reason, not negative reasons even, but just like, this is not the idea for us. So I will go back, and I know other editors will do this. Like, I would love to see something different. Like, how tied are they to this idea? Are they open to,
that's my story.
yeah, okay. So
yeah, literally.
Where it's just like, there's, where they, and sometimes it's like they want to, maybe they'll try and sell that idea, or say, okay, yeah, talk to me, and then we can have that conversation. So, yeah. So also, if they're like, oh, you don't like my idea, it's like, again, maybe there's different reasons. Maybe it's down the line, that can come out. But like, especially when it's, again, a debut author, we're like, what is going to help launch this career? Like, that's, we want, again, we've mentioned this, like, we want the book to succeed just as much as you do. Like, I promise you guys, we're not like, we're going to acquire this and ruin their writing career, like, absolutely not. We're like, we want this to succeed. And so, so be encouraged by that. And I think, we're all humans. I know that's such a funny thing, but like, again, it could sound scary, the wizard behind the curtain or whatever, but we're all in this, especially again with the faith piece, like just trying to share, the bigger story through fiction, whether it's, faith heavy or coming from a Christian worldview. However the writing comes out, like we all are, that's our desire, that's our heart, from the author, agent, and editor, and then the whole team at the are at Waterbrook. Like, we all believe in that greater message. So so don't be scared. We're just fellow humans along even even with upcoming ACFW. I'll be doing the editor appointments, where you have 5, 10, 15 minutes or whatever it is with an editor to chit chat, which I'm looking forward to. But it's like, you don't have to be scared of me. Half the time I'm like, what am I even doing in life? Like all the jokes of millennials being so unserious about everything, but I'm like, I'm the one in charge now. Like, I don't, why?
Right.
I need like 15 years more experience, but yeah, so we're just along the ride too, and learning all this as we, not the skills. I do promise, but like, oh wow, they're nervous to see me because I'm going to give them like, don't be nervous, even though I get it, 100%, I get it, but I'm like, also, I'm going to be so chill. We're going to have fun. I'll start talking about my cat, and they'll be like, I don't care about your cat. They'll be like, look how cute he is. So yeah, and then I would also say, keep going, don't give up, even if, like you said, you don't have those rejections. But if you're like, hey, there's three or four publishers have said no, different reasons. Talk to your agent, being like, hey, do I need to start brainstorming other ideas? Do you think that's it? Is it too crowded? Like what are some ideas we can talk with? And they might say like, hey, let's just wait, let's timing and all that, all the different reasons. But when you have a great agent, you can trust kind of where they're going and who they're pitching it to or submitting it to. And then I would say, Hannah, for those who are in I'm going to give it to my editor. Here we go. I feel like 20 times, but just to reiterate, because I know sometimes people, whether in fiction or nonfiction, with all the, they don't maybe have the greatest experience or whatever it is, but it's just remember they're for you. We are for you. With fiction, it's like we've read at least samples, if it was a different book idea that you eventually went with, Hannah. But so we believe in your writing. And again, I love working with debut authors. So when they come back with the feedback, just trust that, they're doing it to make the story better. So I know it's like, but these are my words. I worked so hard on it. But
I will say that was a really hard season, was when we kind of went on submission. The editor had kind of found me on Instagram. And so she was one of the first ones that we submitted to. But when I got that phone call, I was sitting in Hobby Lobby parking lot with my kids, and my agent was like, she doesn't want your book, but she wants your idea. And I was like, what? Like, that was so hard to take, because I was like, I was so confused. I mean, I literally remember asking my agent, I was like, so she didn't like my writing, but she likes my writing. I was like, I am so confused right now. She's like, no. Like, slow down, stop. Because, that was just like but I'm glad to hear that it happens in other, at other publishers too, where you're like, okay, this was good, but like, let's talk about something else.
Yeah. And it's the like, because when especially with fiction, just because I love it so much, like, if I'm going after a book, that means I'm excited about it. That means I'm like, ooh, I want this book. I don't know what other publishers are going after this, but man, am I ready for this or for that author or whatever it is. And so we're for you. And
I think for me, it was just a confusion, because it was almost like a genre swap too. What I had kind of like toyed with and posted about on Instagram. That just shows you, if you are going to post something on Instagram, be prepared. But like, but you mentioned it earlier with the sci-fi versus romance thing. Like, I had branded myself very rom-com-y, and here I was writing this very heavy, Francine Rivers kind of thick, heavy novel. And they were like, this is not you. Like, this is not the you we get on social media. And I was like, okay.
I would take that as such a big compliment, because they were like, you can write something different. Like, they
totally
saw that in you. So
it took me a minute to see that, because I was like, so
right.
hard, and I love this book, and it made me cry, and it made me happy. And they're like, that's not you, sorry.
No, I totally get it, because again, I've been on the other side where they're like, oh, this feature we don't want. I'm like, how rude! You don't like it, whatever it is.
Hate
I'm
me.
like, I totally get it. Like, I'm on both sides of it, So
totally.
But again, now at the end of this book, I'm like, okay, this is what God wanted me to write. This is the lane that God wants me walking in. So I feel pretty good now. But in that moment, it was just like,
I know, it can be. Totally. Well, for our last bigger question for you, we would love to talk with you a little bit about Christian publishing and what you see happening right now, what you see maybe trending, what's different now in the industry than 5 years ago, and maybe what you foresee. Just your observations.
I'm it's been cool to see how it's developed, and I think there's always, for lack of a better word, work we can do, on the I think people are readers, because what we want the readers to obviously buy the books. We want to challenge readers and stuff like that. So it's a mix of, hey, what needs to be shared, and then what are we seeing readers responding to. So I think, having kind of digging, not that it has to be like super heavy novel, but digging into different themes. Like it could be a rom-com, but the character deals with, maybe mental
Mm-hmm.
health stuff or something like that, or
Mhm.
there's grief involved but that's still weaved into, a lighter story, I should say. So I
Mhm.
think there's definitely been a more willingness to like, let's, not that there's anything wrong with just light and fluffy. Like I
Mm-hmm.
just read one of those and I was like, my brain just needed
Yep.
to cruise, so there's
Mm-hmm.
always going to be space for that too. But I think that's something that people are more open to, and you're seeing that in so many of the releases that are coming out from the
Mhm.
industry as a whole, which I love. I also think, which has long been something I, even in my book blogging days, my little blog, wasn't going to change an industry, but I was like, well, we need diversity, and
Mm.
this crazy climate, as
Mm-hmm.
it, so much division, people, um, thankfully, I think as a whole, we're seeing that as a very positive thing. And it's not
Mm-hmm.
always going to be issue driven fiction. It's just a rom com with Black people, or,
Mm-hmm.
or an interracial couple, or, kind of representing Latina and Latino readers, or
Mm-hmm.
Asian readers, or all the things. And even outside of ethnicity and race, representing all kinds of readers, whether that's mental health or disability, or whatever it is. I think that has been more open, which I love seeing. And I think I want to encourage. Oh gosh, I forgot the author who kind of said this. I want to. I'm forgetting her name, so sorry if she ever hears this randomly. But she wrote Yellowface, which is a,
Oh my gosh, yes.
but she said it so eloquently. I was like, yes, that's what I say. Like a lot of people are like, oh no, that means no more white people are getting published in Christian fiction,
Yeah.
and that's not the case at all. Or we'll say like, oh, does that mean if I'm white, I can never write another ethnicity in my book? Can I not have, and like, absolutely, that's not cut
Mm-hmm.
off after. Absolutely, you cannot do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
Absolutely, that's not the case at all. And then what this author said, is, she's like, just do it well. Like if you're gonna do it,
Mhm.
just do it well. So whether that means,
Mm-hmm.
sensitivity, authenticity readers, sensitivity readers, like, use
Mm-hmm.
those. The people who do that are, again, back to the whole editorial process. And I did that before I moved into editorials. Like, we're just pointing out blind spots, which we have everywhere. So again,
Mm-hmm.
whether
Yeah.
it's ethnicity or something else, it's like, oh, a person who has that wouldn't actually do that.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Or it's like, why do you lean into this slight stereotype when it doesn't move the story along? Like
Mm-hmm.
just calling
Yeah.
out which we all have, our blind spots.
Yeah.
And so it's been encouraging to see stories like that done well, but then also, of course, elevating BIPOC voices. And I mean, we still have a lot of work, and in general publishing too, I'll say, still a lot of work of representing the readership,
Mm-hmm.
and like one of my first acquisitions was An American Immigrant by Joanna Rojas Van, and she's Colombian, and she's one of my faves. And it told the story of her mother's. I actually have it, so I'll put it on camera.
Yeah.
It did this story of
Oh, it's
her
beautiful.
mother's experience immigrating from Colombia through Mexico to
Mm-hmm.
the U.S., and then her story as that, second gen. I'm too Colombian for America, but too American for Colombian. So
Mm-hmm.
that journey of her, like, embracing her heritage. And so I'm like, that speaks to so many people's experiences. And her mom's story was incredible too. And people finding out, like, my parents went through that. Like, they just didn't
Yeah.
talk about it, and the journey of that way. So I'm thankful that more stories like that want to be told.
Mm.
And I hope that continues. But yeah, and I think too, people, this could sometimes, like, if we're not, there's still going to be people who want faith heavy content, and that's
Mm-hmm.
beautiful. And especially in historical fiction, I think of, that is weaved in, because that was such a, in at least the US and like England or whatever, very weaved in. Or if it's biblical fiction, you're gonna see that more. But I think too, people we have an opportunity as authors to reach a broader market as well. You know, if it's like, oh, this comes from my faith background, and so you see it through, but maybe it's not as what's the right word? I don't want to say vocal because it's neither one is bad, you know, but
Yeah.
Mhm.
Heavy-handed,
it's not as
maybe.
prominent as like other ones, but there's space for both, and
Right.
neither as a Christian, neither is right or wrong, I guess, is my whole
Yeah.
point in bringing this up. If
Totally.
you're called to, like, this character prays, this character, you know, the prayers are in the book, you know, this character has a redemption prayer or whatever it is, like that's great. Again, go with where God's calling you to. But if you're like, man, I just want a story that it comes through, but it just looks a little different, like, that's okay too. You know, that can have a different reach than one, but they're both good things. So I think we'll continue to see that more and more, because we want Christian, all those involved want Christian fiction to succeed. You know, we want it to still be the genre and not just disappear. You know, so it's like ways we can reach the reader that help with that, for sure.
Yeah. I think Stephanie and I both have kind of struggled with that, like how much is too much, how much, like heavy, like Stephanie said, kind of that heavy handedness. And we're seeing so much of the industry lean towards that, those books that aren't necessarily, you don't really see the prayers in it, you don't see the scripture in it, but you can just, it just reads as Jesus, it just reads as light. And so I think we're seeing a lot more of that. Like Melissa Ferguson's doing a lot of it. Courtney Walsh, you know, people like that just are leaning into that happy, that light. And by light, I don't mean necessarily fluffy, but like, you know, the light of Jesus. And you can just feel that they're writing a cultural story through a Christian worldview. And I feel like that entices more people, because I at least pray that my characters, when you read them, that somebody who maybe doesn't believe or is on the fence could pick them up and say, oh, I want what this character has. Well, that's Jesus.
It could plant seeds. It can do, and I mean, you look through history, and some that are very faith forward have sold millions and had an impact, but there's also those, you know, again, this is an extreme example, and don't ever comp C.S. Lewis to any of your proposals, but you know, Chronicles of Narnia, like, people love that, like, again, old school example. But if you're ever doing fantasy, don't be comp C.S. Lewis. And we're like, what? Maybe the content is similar, but as you know,
so
maybe
funny.
don't comp him, you know, or Tolkien if you're writing a fantasy. Maybe you find some more recent ones, but yeah,
I know. And the reason the word heavy-handed came to my mind, it's so hard not to, like, say too much now that I have an agent. It's like, even like, what, I don't want to, like, I don't know, say too much about our process, but there were points in my book where she actually wanted me to add a little bit more faith to add depth, but she said do it with a light hand. So I was like, okay. And it was it was deep but light, and it's, I don't know, I hope that it came out natural, and you don't want it to be just, I don't know, out of left field. There are so many, like you said, just like long time standing Christian classics that are overwhelming bestsellers, like Redeeming Love, but I don't know, I am hoping and seeing that there's more of that, like, middle space that can reach more people. And also, just even if it doesn't mention faith at all, like, I know Courtney Walsh's books don't necessarily, but like, it's an author you can trust. She's coming from a Christian worldview. It's not going to come at you out of left field with something that just totally blindsides you, whether that's explicit sex or something else that rubs your spirit wrong. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time.
Rom-com, and you're like, oh, this is a spicy rom-com.
Right? Like, oh. Yeah. And Danielle and I also have had several conversations about the diversity thing, and she just said that, like, it's, in a lot of ways, unfortunately, Christian publishing is behind in that, and like, what a shame. Like, let's do what we can to at least catch up to the mainstream. So yeah, I love hearing your perspective on that, and those are all great things to think about.
Yes.
I would love for us to be leading the ways in a lot of the things that change, you know, so.
I know, and I think we can. It's been really cool since starting the podcast and now going to ACFW. It's sort of this very neat, listeners, Hannah, myself, and Jamie will all be there at ACFW. It's a huge conference in New Orleans, and like, less than 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Just so many amazing people, mostly women, but men too. Just a big powerhouse of people who want to get together and
Yeah, I'm excited.
help change the
I'm so
world through
excited to meet you
books.
guys in person. So that'll
I
be
know, you
Yes.
too. We're counting the days and planning our outfits
Oh,
and,
Lord.
I had to find a gala dress. I was like, I was at the mall, and I know we're a little oversold, but I was like, why is it either Mother of the Bride vibe or like
I know,
homecoming freshman year? Like neither of those
right?
yet. So or not yet. Obviously, one I'm way past, but like not looking for Mother of the Bride. Like they're gorgeous
And
dresses.
right?
Yeah.
A lot of the gowns these days have slits somewhere in the torso.
Like,
I'm like, I don't want a slit for a gala
yeah.
at
No
a
one
writing
needs to see
home.
that.
You know?
That's the non-tan part too. Like no one needs to see that, you know. But
Exactly.
yeah,
Oh
I
my
think I got one.
goodness.
So
Good. I can't wait to see it. Well, one more question and then we'll let you go. What was your last 5-star read? What was the last read that really blew you away?
okay, I wrote them down because I was like, oh gosh. So of course I can't just do one because
Of
there's
course.
so many. But I did
Yes.
already
More than
mention
one.
Ariel, codename Helene. The Frozen River is her latest, which I'm excited to read. But she takes real life stories. If you love historical fiction, and she publishes in the general market, but she's a Christian herself. But she tells amazing stories. So her, and I could email this to you guys so you guys don't have to.
Yeah, great. I didn't know she was a Christian. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, she's great. And okay, so Gabrielle Meyer's Timeless series. Have you guys heard of this one from Bethany House? And so it's like, oh gosh,
Yay.
it's the story. So it's like magical realism because the main character they're living two lives. So they go to sleep in one time and then wake up in another. So they're living the same day twice in different time periods. And so I think her third book is the one I just finished, and that one is For a Lifetime, and it's actually with twins who have this. So like,
oh, I love
and
this.
Bethany House just keeps promising more. I'll see her like, oh, I just signed for book whatever, and I'm like, good, because I thoroughly enjoy those stories.
Oh, I can't wait.
And so and then Chanel Clayton, she's General Market. She is Cuban, and her Cuban sister series, where it's like a story of each sister. And I think the first one was a Reese pick, one of the book club picks. It was Last Night in Havana. And it's, again, a lot of it was based off of her family story and, when Fidel was coming to power and all that. And then some go back further. The Most Beautiful Girl in Cuba is, I think, one of my favorite from hers. I'm like, I like them all. And then, one wasn't as just whatever. But, and so her latest, I really enjoyed, I'm going to say it wrong, but it's The House on Biscayne Bay. It takes place like in Miami. And it's kind of, it's not with the family from the first series, but it's kind of mystery gothic vibes, historical. So she's become like, coming a new book. Okay, I'm gonna get it. So
I love that.
And then I had to give a shout out in the nonfiction space. It's been a while since I've read it, and I'm due for a reread. But Tish Harrison Warren's Prayer in the Night. Have you guys read that one?
No.
Oh my gosh,
is she the one who wrote Liturgy of the Ordinary?
Yes.
I loved that book. I loved it.
Prayer in the Night. I think it won whatever year it was, the Christianity Today Book of the Year. But it's, even if you're not going through like a quote unquote night season, it was so good, and she writes beautifully. So
beautiful writing.
And then if you like history like me, Eric Larson or David Gran, they both write fantastic books. In the Garden of the Beasts for Eric Larson, and was an excellent one. And then David Gran's recent one, The Wager, is about like a real life shipwreck. And it's funny because I love the beach. I think the ocean is beautiful, but I also have a healthy fear of it.
Yes.
Terror of like, especially deep ocean, like out there chaos. So I don't know why I keep reading books that feature shipwrecks, but whatever. But they're fascinating because it's like
Yeah.
what happened and how people survived. And I'm like, I
Yes.
was thankfully born in this era, not in the 1716 or 1500s. I would not have
Yes.
survived. But that was another really good. I've been using audiobooks for nonfiction, and that's like changed my life. Like I was like, oh, it's like a podcast, because I don't know if you guys, but I read so fast with fiction that I'm like listening to it. I'm like, but I don't want to hear it on like speed. So I just like to read it. But nonfiction audiobook has been great. So I mean, I could talk book recs for hours, but I'll stop at that.
We love it.
Yeah, so those were some all good ones. But
thank you so much for all of those. Definitely send them to us if you have the list, and we'll link them up in show notes. And we will also link up to where we can find your personal writing. Do you still blog?
I moved it over to Substack just because that I really like that platform.
Yes.
So it's easy to find. I have two because I'm a big nerd on Tolkien and C.S. Lewis. Like extra geeky, like Art of Writing, the Christies later. I get to actually talk a little bit about Tolkien and his influence, so that'll be fun. But so that's International Inklings Day, which is the day they met and became besties and helped their writing career. So that's a whole other thing. But that's International Inklings Day at Substack or .substack.com, and then my personal one is Musings of Jamie. Substack.com. But
great.
So yeah, so that's I'm mainly just on Instagram. Like I technically have Facebook pages, but so I can like say I have a presence there. Like I don't do anything. I should delete them, but I'm like, I'll probably one day on Facebook, so I haven't. But Instagram, and then if you like cats, TikTok, it's just at Musings of Jamie. I figured that's easier than at Jamie Lapeyrolerie to try and Google that. So yeah, that's where you can find me. And I on the musings, I do like to talk about. I'm on kind of a break right now, but do like to talk about publishing and books and stuff like that. So it's a variety of things. But if you're interested in that, join.
Yes.
Wonderful.
I just got on the Substack train. I prefer it. I love it.
It's nice that it's kind of like a newsletter. Place to write.
I'm slowly like moving over all my blogs from my website like over there, and I'm like, I've got a website for, like you said, for the presence there, but all my stuff's gonna be on Substack because it's just easier.
So definitely have still a website if you're an author, so people can just find it quickly. But if you're thinking about blogging consistently, definitely check out options for Substack. So
awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us. This was just the most incredible, insightful, fun conversation. And
I'm glad. This
we can't. It was so fun. We can't wait to meet you in the flesh in a couple weeks. And it's going to be so fun. And listeners, please let us know what you think. Please send us comment with any follow-up questions. We are happy to answer them. We will be posting little snippets of this conversation, and you can listen to the episode next week. And we're just so thankful for all of you. Thanks again for listening, and thanks again, Jamie.
Yeah, it's been great. Bye, everyone.
Bye.